In today's video, I'm gonna keep reviewing that research and that article which suggests that the brain does not store memory anywhere, but rather memory is encoded at a cellular, synaptic, molecular, and circuit level, which means that we are talking about pure information. This ties to the ideas of the brain being some sort of a filter for consciousness rather than the originator of consciousness, which current science believes. There's a lot of theories, a lot of information, a lot of research showing things that suggest that the brain is some sort of a filter for this larger consciousness that exists everywhere. In that previous video, I looked at how they got this conclusion. I'm gonna link it somewhere in the screen, but in today's video, I want to go a little bit deeper into the actual implications of what we're talking about. I go a little bit further in the article where they bring out some examples that I found very interesting, like the idea that memory exists even in creatures without a central nervous system, without a brain. Which means that if memory can exist without the brain is not the originator of consciousness. I go a little bit into the idea, these two ideas of this quantum network of consciousness and the idea of genetic information and whether there's a difference about it. I made a video about premortal existence and how it seems that mammals dream about the world before coming in. And one of the main arguments that came out from that video was whether we're talking about a quantum field of consciousness or genetic information being passed on. And my conclusion to that is there any difference? I go into some examples that I'm going to be approaching in the future, like what's the intelligence behind a school of fish when all the fish are moving in the same direction? What is the intelligence that makes them move at the same time? In lifetime, research has shown that it's genetic information, but what is the intelligence that makes them move at the same time? This coordinated communication which exists outside their brain, outside the physical fish, and it ties into some of the other videos that I made, some of the other examples. Everything is adding to the puzzle. I made a video on magnetoencephalography and how it seems that this technology suggests that when the brain is processing thoughts, these thoughts go outside of the brain. And this technology captures these thoughts and recreates an image of the brain. All of this is tying towards the same thing, and into this video I'm going to be looking at the conclusion, what seems to be the conclusions about all these things, which is that the very likely possibility that we might be living in some sort of an information matrix, some sort of what people like to call a quote-unquote simulation, which I personally do not like the concept of it, and I'm gonna be going into it in the future. But I start approaching all of these theories and all of these very real possibilities. Before I move forward, I would like to remind you that if you want to join the growing discussion on consciousness and would like to be notified on the latest scientific discoveries and theories surrounding this topic and how they connect to ancient mythologies and philosophies, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, as I'll try to upload at least one video per week as I continue with the outline. So guys, researchers from the University of California, Los Angeles recently discovered that some bacteria have memory. This memory enables the bacteria to pass sensory knowledge from one cell generation to the next without the need of neurons or a central nervous system. So what's happening? You know, they talk about the scientists in the 1900s and how they started to look at quantum, at the quantum world and quantum physics, and they were like, shut up and calculate. What's going on? What's reality? What's happening? So, you know, if you talk about slamming the scientific dogma with a sledgehammer, you think about, you know, as I said, the book in the 90s, and some people, especially the older generation, the baby boomers, and I've seen it, you know, as I've been doing this research and as I've been sharing my research on YouTube, and I wrote that book and I wrote all these things, and I'm starting to get my work published and out there, and I get a lot of negative feedback, especially coming from the older generation who think the ultimate truth relies in these books from the 90s. And this is just not the case. So what exactly are we talking about here? You know, this, as I said, these scientists from the 1900s, they said, okay, what is quantum physics? What's really going on? And some of the scientists said, no, there's nothing weird going on here. Consciousness is not related to it, but there's these other studies which completely deny the status quo, the scientific status quo that prevails, and this is what we're looking at here right now. So how can there be memory without a nervous system? Bacteria are single-celled, don't have neurons, and don't have a central nervous system. So how do they have anything that looks like memory? The very existence of memory is a bit surprising, I would say, to say the least. Unfortunately, findings have serious implications for people with cystic fibrosis, and talks about the illness and what. So this is something unrelated, as I said, but it's like, okay, let's just look at this for a moment and let's just delve deeper into this. How can this happen? So it says without neurons or a central nervous system. So you might say, okay, well, it's still in the brain because, you know, the neural activity is happening in the synapse in the brain. So how come that these bacteria without neurons have this memory? We are talking about information. Now, I made a video a while ago, and I'm gonna link it somewhere in the screen in just a second. All the links related can be found below. I made a video about premortal existence, and it's also an ongoing research. There's a study attached to it, and it talks about how mice know and dream, quote unquote, dream about their world before being born, which the implication is that they have access to the world before being born. And in that video talk about how can this happen? Is there a field? Can they access a field? Do they exist as beings before being born and can have access to the external information of their surroundings? Can they? And one of the main counter arguments to that, and it's not really a counter argument, this is just a different way to understand it, was, okay, so the memories from the parents of the mice, and it's not about mice, it's about, this is believed to be in mammals, even humans. You know, they transferred this genetic information, these quote unquote memories. What exactly is a memory? Where is it? Where is it really? If it's not in the neurons, if it's not in the brain, it is at the cellular level. So bacteria has memory as well. What are we talking about? As I said, we can get lost in here, and a lot of people are following me, and a lot of people just clicked off this video, and that's fine. That's completely understandable for the ones that are understanding, and I just want to make it clear. We're talking about information and how all these memories and the qualia and everything is simply information. We're living in the matrix of information. Now we start to understand what's going on here. So whether the understanding is that these mammals, these mice, were accessing the information outside in the world, in the physical world, or whether they were accessing this information through epigenetics, through the genomes from their parents who had experiences in the world, and this is how they could dream about the world before being born. And the studies say exactly how they did this, how they realized, they came to this conclusion. There's really no difference at all. We're talking about the information within, the information at the cellular level, which this information, okay, we look at it and it's just molecules and it's just cells and it's just neural activity. What exactly is all of that? I'll put it simply, and I'll say it simply as a very rough conclusion of the whole thing. This quantum information, this cellular information, these qubits of information is consciousness. Is the consciousness that pervades the universe, is the ultimate consciousness, and it exists everywhere. This is what some people might call God or pantheism or whatever. This is what we're talking about here. So the implication is that these mice had access to this information either through their parents, through the genome, or through just going into the information of the world, just looking at the world. And you know, if you think about it, if this seems completely impossible for you or for anyone watching this, and say, oh, a rat or a mice or a mammal for that matter cannot be on a spirit form, like the ancient Buddhist texts would say that in between lives the spirits are roaming and trying to see where they're gonna incarnate in between lives and so on and so forth. Well, what did we have recorded? Recorded research on out-of-body experiences and near-death experiences. As I said, the near-death experience research is beginning to be seriously studied, and there was this scientific consensus statement which happened in April, I believe, this year, 2022. I'm going to link it somewhere on the screen. I made a video about it. So if we start to say that out-of-body experiences are a thing, and this information that people perceive during this out-of-body experience, whether through a near-death experience, whether through psychedelics or whatever, they're accessing this information that exists outside their brains. And as I said, I made that video. I think I already linked it or I already linked it at the beginning, or I'm going to link it right now if I haven't, of how magnetoencephalography is proving that this quantum field, this magnetic field of consciousness exists, and it's somewhere out there. All the research is pointing towards this. And now another way that we can look at it, and I pulled this little image here because I was going to make a video on this. This is a phenomenon that I'm really interested about. This is just a school of fish. When you think about a school of fish or a flock of birds, or how can this behavior occur? This is very interesting. So they made some research about this, and they realized that all of these fish in their genome, at the cellular level, again, at the basic building blocks information of what makes a fish, have this information. This is what the research suggests, because there are some fish which live in caves and which do not form schools of fish, and they don't have this information in their genome, and they found that all of these fish have information in their genome. So you might come to the conclusion that it's all information in the genomes. What exactly does that mean? We really don't know. But this is just a question to kind of dig further into the whole thing. How does that genome, how does that information at the cellular level tells the fish to rotate on a specific direction, or to navigate, or to see a rock, or to see an interference like this human here, and make them all move together at the same time, just how birds move at the same time? We're talking about something that envelops the intelligence outside of the fish, outside of the brain, outside of the internal genome. Everything seems to be connected. There seems to be a field that connects everything, and this information is transferred to the fish almost telepathically. How can this fish know that this fish is going to move in a different direction because this human here is interfering? The connection, the communication is not even verbal, it's just through thought. And what exactly is thought? As I said, we come to realize that thought exists outside of the brain, and there's all these magnetic fields. All of these fish have a magnetic field outside of them. Animals create magnetic fields. We're living in a field of information. I know that I've gone a little bit further into this rabbit hole than I wanted to, but it's important to start conceiving this and to integrate these ideas into the research, because this is what I do with this research. I go into the actual research and try to interpret it, then I pose these almost philosophical questions. How does this even happen? So they say what they are finding out is that so it's in the genome, but how exactly does this information is transferred to each other in real time? This is not explained in that research on the genome. How do you explain that bacteria with our nervous system, with our brain, has memory? How do you explain that all of these memories, all of this information creates who we are? And we're talking about information. If you want to think about it as quantum information, think about it as quantum information. We're talking about information within a matrix, and this is who and what we are. It's not our brain. As I said, all of these little things, I'm just adding pieces to the puzzle. Think about a school of fish, think about bacteria, think about the brain and how memory is recollected. Think about Fenwick's cosmic consciousness, think about the orchestrated objective reduction, think about how magnetoencephalography works. It's all parts of the puzzle. So, as I said, what does all of this mean? As I said, this article has a very interesting metaphor right here, which is it ties together the main issue of consciousness. So it says, human memory is even the most precious, beginning at a granular scale. Your mother's face began as a barrage of photons on your retina, which send a signal to your visual cortex. You hear her voice, and your auditory cortex transforms the sound waves into electrical signals. Hormones layer the experience with context. This person makes you feel good. This is exactly what is happening when you form a memory, and especially when you put emotion into it. What we're talking about is that, as I said, I don't like the idea of a simulation, but for the sakes of understanding this, let's talk about simulation theory. We're living in a quote-unquote simulation. We are a matrix of information, and these experiences, this human experience, is just information, the photons on your retina, because this is how we perceive reality. If you look at an apple, you're not really seeing an apple. You're seeing a bunch of particles together and the photons reflecting from the light existing. If you're in complete darkness, you're never gonna see an apple. Your eyes are not gonna see an apple. If you're born blind, you're never gonna see an apple through your specific, let's call it incarnation, perception, experience. So we're talking about information. The auditory cortex transforms the sound waves. These are sound waves into electrical signals. We're talking about electricity. We're talking about qubits. We're talking about all this information perceived into consciousness. It's the orchestrated reduction that Burns and Hammer talk about, which goes into something even more interesting. They package the whole experience within a so-called time window. So when we start thinking that time does not exist, what do we do with all of this? We're orchestrating these emotions, we're orchestrating this experience in a specific time window. And now, this is how we explain reality. This is what's happening through perceptions. This is how the conscious experience and the memory exist, and the perception exists, and the qualia exist. Why? For what reason? For what? I made a video about this, where I go into a little bit about how all this research suggests that there is purpose to life. Now, you talk about near-death experiences where people go through the life review and they look at all of these experiences in their lives and they relive them. They travel through time, and the most interesting thing is that they see the whole thing from outside of them. They sometimes see it through the eyes of the other people. They experience their feelings, their information that they are generating within their own perception. This is the only way. This is the only existence of a being experiencing the qualia of another being, and I use it in a weird way. You experience the qualia. What exactly is qualia? And the more strict philosophers are gonna be like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. Which is what we're talking about. They talk about the flavor of chocolate, of the experience of the color red, and so on and so forth. The experience of a traumatic experience of you hurting another person. That is qualia. That is their perception of a human being. And what happens in their experiences is that the subject experiences what the other person felt as they were hurting them, in the negative experiences, of course. And all of this is in a non-judgmental way, with entities around them or some sort of entity guiding them and showing love and compassion and feeling this incredible love and being surrounded by a light and a whole spectacle of things. I read near their experience where all of this, the judge was some sort of a cricket figure, a bug figure. These experiences can be quite complex, as I said, and a little bit all over the place, which relay into the idea that these are hallucinations. This is not the case. This is something that goes beyond. I'm going to be talking into it in the future, but this is the only way that people can experience the qualia of another. So when you think that there is no time, really, I'm gonna be making this video in the future. What do you do with all of this? Okay, so just to finish the article, this is a nested system with individual memories existing with multiple time windows of varying lengths. Yes, this is very hard for neuroscientists to understand too, which means it's going to be a long time before they understand the nuts and bolts of memory formation. We don't know what memories are. We don't know where the qualia exists. We don't know what thoughts are. When people are saying, "Oh, well, this does not prove anything," your thoughts are not this brain activity. We don't know what they are. We don't know where this information exists. We simply do not know. It's hard for neuroscientists to understand this. It's going to be a long time before we truly understand exactly what is going on, but we have a lot of evidence, as I've been saying, of what might be happening. And when you look into, as I said, into the reservoir of near-death experiences and psychedelic experience and transcendental experience and ancient scriptures, and you overlap all of that on top of each other with the current research and all of these things, you start to draw some sort of a conclusion. And this is the purpose of this channel, and this is the purpose of this project, A Rational Divine Outline. This is what I'm doing. I'm overlapping all of these ancient scriptures, modern research, so on and so forth, and what does it come from it. And I'm going a little bit into the more philosophical ideas of this. I said I made that video where I talk about how research suggests that there is meaning to your life. Why are we doing all of this simulation? Remembering your mother's face. What does that mean to you? What happened there? It seems that we are in the process of creating something. I'm gonna be, all of this research that I've been going into is basis for a theory that I am starting to work on what is the purpose, why are we doing this, what is this Earth project, why are we alive, what's going on. So as I said, if you go into psychedelic experience, into the transcendental experience, into the near-death experience, it seems that all of these people are reviewing their lives. They're gaining these experiences for a reason, and there are external intelligence or intelligences which are orchestrating this whole thing, this whole, let's call it quote-unquote simulation. There are these external intelligence that are just managing all of this, and they are trying to communicate, as I said, with us in this time frame, in this space. So why is this all happening? What's going on? As I said, I'm going to be looking into this series in the future, but what we can conclude from all of this is that we are talking about information. We're talking about qubits, we're talking about quantum information which exists at the cellular level, within and outside your brain, in the very process of the synapses, of the thought process. It is the process. It does not exist anywhere. It is the process. It is the orchestrated reduction that Peirce and Hammer talk about. They talk about how at the moment of the day, all this information leaks outside into a larger sort of field, into some sort of a database. So right now we're talking about simulation, we're talking about database, we're talking about quantum information. In previous times they talked about God, they talked about heaven, they talked about the spirit, the Holy Spirit, as I said. And people call me crazy because of that, and some people are not gonna like this, but this is the concept of it, the Bill of Maya, the Atman, the Brahman, this larger sort of thing that encompasses everything. And all of these goes all crazy and it's complicated, but at the end of the day, as I said, as complex and as convoluted as all of this might seem, the ultimate reality seems to be a positive one. There seems to be purpose, and as many have concluded due to their transcendental experiences, it's all about love, it's all about experience, and we are part of a larger game that we are barely beginning to understand. If you're on the path of finding the truth about reality and our purpose as humans on Earth, the information that I have to share concerns you. After a lifetime of research in philosophies ranging from Buddhism to the occult, I've encountered themes and patterns along some baffling information that is beginning to be seriously studied by science. A Rational Divine Outline, The Ghost of Jesus, is the first iteration of this project, where I analyze the message of Jesus without dogmatism, fanaticism, or religious bias. You can find my work available on Amazon on the link below. If you find this work valuable, consider subscribing, sharing, and following me on social media, as it'll help others in the same path to find this information. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.